All right, so I just wanted to share a mathematical philosophy, or just some things I've been thinking about recently, where we just sort of take a step back and think about the bigger picture about what we're doing when we're teaching and learning maths. And I came across this excerpt from a book. It was actually in a book called The Thriving Adolescent. It was actually all about acceptance and commitment therapy from a psychological point of view. But this excerpt really stood out to me with my maths teaching background. So I'll just read it out. Our culture strives to build young people's cognitive skills above all else, teaching them maths, science, and literature and focusing constantly on grades. Young people must take standardized tests and then they're ranked so everyone knows exactly how good they are. Teachers are often encouraged to spend substantial time teaching students how to take these tests in order to make their schools look good in comparison to others. Ambitious parents engage tutors to give their children an edge. In short, we've created a world where young people spend 12 years developing their academic intelligence. Meanwhile, social skills receive short shrift. Academic reasoning is a tool, not a valued end. It's a hammer, not a house. The grade itself isn't valuable. It only points to the possibility that these skills may someday be used to do good in the world. Once we recognize that academics are merely a tool, we can focus on what's actually important. How are young people using the academic reasoning? So I think that sort of sums up the point of what I want to talk about today. But there are just a few points in terms of outlining a philosophy of mathematics teaching and learning that have been on my mind, and I just wanted to share with you, and I'd be glad to hear what you guys think as well in terms of your experience of teaching and learning maths. So any good philosophy, I think, starts with a question. And to me, the question that's been on my mind is, what are we doing? When we're learning and teaching mathematics, say we're in a classroom or some other space where, learning mathematics is sort of the key goal, what are we doing? And I encourage you to pause and think. You could spend the rest of your life trying to understand this question, I think. But I think a few common answers come to people's mind. One is that we're trying to develop useful citizens, people that can contribute to the world in some way, similar to the point that was made previously. The other thing that comes to mind for me maybe is problem-solving skills, developing skills so that we can become better people, so we can then use those sort of mathematical reasoning skills in other areas of our lives so that we can be useful to our community and to other people around us. And so sort of to those ends, I just wanted to make a few points just to see how, in some ways, the school system and sort of teaching and learning of mathematics aligns with that, and in some ways that it doesn't. So let me just make a few points. One way we can define something is by defining what it isn't, so using a bit of mathematical logic there. So I think that mathematics should not be transactional. And I think what ends up happening in a lot of classrooms is, and in any space where you're teaching and learning mathematics, it ends up being this sort of transaction. The teacher generally stands at the front, they sort of hold the facts, then they transmit those facts using the voice and sort of other, whiteboard or whatever it might be, and then students exchange effort for grades. And I think this is a real concern in terms of understanding the broader picture of what we're trying to achieve when we engaged in mathematical learning. So I think that's an important first point. We shouldn't just be transacting. And one way we can sort of see this, where I think students have a sort of transactional mindset, is sometimes students will say to me things like, oh, you didn't teach us this. Or sometimes they'll say, will this be on the test? As if I'm some sort of authority on mathematics, and then they need to sort of access the facts that I've got and then perform them in a sort of, in a sort of performative way on the assessment to get a grade. I think we need to sort of move away from that. I know this probably isn't anything groundbreaking. A lot of people might agree with me on that. But I think we just need to remind ourselves sometimes of the bigger picture, and that, we shouldn't be engaged in this sort of transaction of mathematical sort of thinking and reasoning. It has to be much bigger than that if we're to get something out of it, something meaningful out of it. I think intuitively people understand this, that getting the right answers matters less than understanding why. I think when mathematical learning environments are set up well, students really understand that. They're developing themselves, they're developing their learning skills and their reasoning skills, and that getting the right answer does matter less than understanding why. I've known students that do very poorly on assessments, for example, but I know that they actually understand the core concept, which to me is more mathematically authentic. So that doesn't really bother me. I think the key idea is that students see that getting the right answer is not as important as understanding why. And sometimes, you'll even see students like trying to cheat as if they're sort of getting away with something. And this sort of points to this point where it's like, oh, if I just sneak off and, have a look at someone else's paper, I might get the right answer. But at what cost, right? The important thing is understanding why these concepts fit together and how the world works, right? Or how the universe works. Here's just another point that I see all the time. So many students are held back by what they believe they can't do. I think they think that, they're at a certain level of understanding, but mathematics is a broad spectrum. Everyone's at a different level. Certain things that students see as being out of their reach. And I think that's concerning because, the world is a fascinating place and it's a very mathematical place, and we shouldn't be limiting ourselves by what we think we can and can't do. And then, having all these sort of concerning beliefs about, what mathematics is and what mathematics learning looks like, I think can hold students back a little bit as well. Okay, I think this is a really important point as well, is that we must prioritize the learning process over the assessment. It sounds very cliche, but it has to be about the journey, not about the destination. As I said before, the grade is not a valued end in itself. It's what are we going to use that information that we've learned so that we can help the world in some way, so that we can be a better person, be a better friend, be a better student, be a better teacher, be a better learner as well. So we need to prioritize the learning process, and I think that takes a bit of mindfulness and saying, all right, this is difficult, this is part of the process, but being persistent as well. And this is an obvious point as well, but school mathematics is only the tip of a much larger iceberg. You could spend your whole life studying mathematics. What we learn in school is such a small part of the mathematical universe. And we sometimes, I think, what's the phrase? You can't see the wood from the trees. We are in a very small, isolated bubble sometimes in schools, and we forget that we're engaged in something that has gone back for all of human history, understanding how concepts fit together mathematically. So we try not to lose sight of that. I think it's important in the classroom when we have specific tasks in front of us. Okay, and this is to the point before, we value learning because we want to contribute to the world. I think we forget that the whole reason we're sort of doing this is so that we can become useful people, kind people, compassionate, so that we can help others and contribute to the world in some way. I think we get so bogged down in assessment and it becomes competitive randomly. I think mathematics should be collaborative in the sense that we're all working together to sort of understand and contribute. But if we can really hold on to this idea that we're value learning because we want to contribute to the world or to make ourselves better so that we can help others, I think that's an important point. And not to lose sight of what mathematics is about. I think we get stuck in thinking that mathematics is about assessment. I think that's a really concerning thing that I see with a lot of students. For example, the other day I did a task where it was a bit more collaborative and we had to sort of work on something together and sort of I think it involved using Excel or using a computer. But it's just interesting to see the students' reactions in terms of how they responded to it. It sort of reminded me that sometimes students can see mathematics as being fixed. Mathematics is about textbook questions. You just need to answer a bunch of questions. That's what mathematics is. And then other things that sort of don't lead into the assessment or aren't explicitly about the assessment aren't mathematics. It's important to sort of examine our beliefs about what we think mathematics is and to understand, what we believe about mathematics and about ourselves. Okay, this is a really important point. So just for one thing, AI wrote all of this code that you're seeing here, just using some Python code. And AI systems already outperform us computationally. And your average human, unless you're a high-level mathematician, sort of university level, you're not going to be making necessarily huge breakthroughs in mathematics. So we really need to understand that maths is about building our capacity, and it has to be for these 2 points. We have to be doing it for the love of learning and understanding, because we're going to be outcompeted. The thinking skills are going to be outcompeted by AI systems. So we really need to be doing it for the love of learning and understanding and of creation. Because, sometimes you hear stories about what all the humans are going to do when AI takes over. And, I sometimes joke around that, hopefully you like to paint, because these AI systems are going to be so much better at speed and computation when it comes to mathematics that we're really going to have to start, I think, bringing ourselves to the mathematics that we do so that we can see the art form that is the creative expression of mathematical ideas, but that has come from us. And I think that's what I've been trying to do with this channel as well, because these ideas, yes, while they're sort of help write the code with AI, I'm the one that's had to come up with the ideas about how it might be explainable to a human. And so, I sort of think to myself sometimes that, this channel will be maths explained badly by a human, because I think that's the reality going forward, is if you want access to information about mathematics, you're probably just going to use an AI system. And so we're going to need to bring ourselves to the mathematics, whether, you're in year 2 or you're in year 12, there needs to be an element of what are you bringing to the maths? How do you understand it? And what can you create out of it? So anyway, that's just some of the thoughts I've been thinking about recently in terms of the philosophy of teaching and learning maths. Let me know what you think. I'm curious to see what your experience of learning and teaching maths has been. And good luck. I hope all goes well for you, and I'll see you soon.